All right, let's talk about a band that was banned, pretty much broke, and absolutely brilliant, the Kinks. When you think of the British invasion, you think of the Beatles and the Stones. But the Kinks, they were the creative outsiders, the stubborn, sarcastic ones who changed music precisely because they refused to play by anyone else's rules.
Now, to really get why the Kinks still matters so much, we're not going to start in the swinging 60s. Nope. We're jumping ahead to the 90s. Because, and this is the crazy part, without the Kinks, that whole Britpop thing, that massive wave of cool, uniquely British rock, it just might not have happened.
I mean, you can literally draw a straight line from the Kinks to the biggest bands of the 90s. Decades before anyone had even heard the term Britpop, Ray Davies was writing these incredibly sharp, funny songs about the British class system. Take a song like A Well-Respected Man. That is the direct ancestor of Pulp's Common People. It's the same DNA. Bands like Blur and Pulp, they didn't just borrow a sound. They inherited a whole attitude, a whole way of looking at the world from the Kinks.
Okay, so to understand how they built that incredible legacy, we've got to go back, way back, to the beginning. The year is 1964, and a little bit of teenage frustration is about to create a sound that would literally shake the foundations of rock and roll.
So what was their secret weapon? It was the power chord. Before their song You Really Got Me, rock music was built on these full, kind of complex chords. The Kinks just stripped all that away. They boiled it down to this raw, two-note blast of pure energy. It's that simple driving force that became the absolute bedrock of hard rock, heavy metal, and punk. They didn't just use it. For all intents and purposes, they introduced it to the world.
And how did they get that legendary sound? You'd think some fancy new technology, right? It was pure destructive rebellion. After their first couple of singles completely bombed, a super frustrated Dave Davies took his little green amp, an Alpico, and he just attacked it. He slashed the speaker cone with a razor blade and then started stabbing it with pins. It was just an act of sonic vandalism that accidentally created one of the most important guitar tones in history. You have to remember, in the super clean, polished pop world of 1964, this sound was an absolute earthquake. The guitar wasn't just for melodies anymore. It was now this growling, aggressive weapon. You Really Got Me rocketed to #1. And just like that, the Kinks were global superstars. So they've got this massive, world-changing hit. The path is set, right? Global domination, just like the Beatles and the Stones. But here's the thing about the Kinks. Their biggest enemy was almost always themselves. At the absolute peak of their power, a disastrous tour of America didn't just go badly. It got them kicked out.
And it all fell apart so fast it'll make your head spin. The chaos was just relentless. In May, the drummer Mick Avery and Dave Davies get into a violent brawl right on stage. By June, they're basically wrecking their own shows because they're fighting with promoters over money. And then the final nail in the coffin comes in July, when a totally exhausted Ray Davies punches an American union official. You can't make this stuff up.
The fallout was swift and severe. The American Federation of Musicians basically said, nope, you're done. They refused to give them work permits, which meant that from 1965 to 1969, the most transformative years in rock history, the Kinks were banned from the United States. They were completely cut off from the biggest music market in the world.
Now, for pretty much any other band, that is a career-ending disaster. Game over. But for the Kinks, this professional exile turned out to be the most important thing that ever happened to them. It forced Ray Davies to stop trying to write songs for a global audience and instead look inward, to look at his home.
And this forced isolation, it sparked the band's golden age. Since they couldn't tour America, Ray Davies just started writing these intensely, wonderfully English albums. And it all culminated in his masterpiece. The Kinks are the Village Green Preservation Society. The only problem? When it was released in 1968, it was a complete and utter flop. I mean, talk about bad luck. It came out on the exact same day as the Beatles' White Album and was just completely ignored. It didn't chart in the UK, didn't chart in the US, nobody knew what to make of it. And yet, here's the twist. Today, that album is hailed as one of the greatest British records of all time. It is the ultimate cult classic. A record that failed miserably at first, only to become the absolute cornerstone of their entire legacy. So what was on this thing that was so ahead of its time?
Well, the Village Green wasn't a real place. It was an idea inside Ray Davies' head. It was this little psychological sanctuary, this sort of secret place he created to preserve all the quirky, beautiful things about English life, from draft beer and strawberry jam to vaudeville shows, that he saw vanishing in the modern world. It was the sound of a band turning their exile into a powerful, beautiful work of art.
So, after years of making these deeply personal, commercially, challenging albums, the Kinks did the most Kinks thing imaginable. They changed. Completely. In the late 1970s, they basically shed that eccentric English skin and staged one of the most surprising comebacks in the history of rock. For most of the early 70s, they were deep in this theatrical phase, right? Making these huge, sprawling rock operas that confused critics and honestly didn't sell very well. Then they signed a new record deal, dropped all the concepts, and just started writing these direct, hard-hitting arena rock anthems. And America, the very country that banned them, finally embraced them. Just look at the turnaround here. It's unbelievable. In 1968, Village Green, their critical masterpiece, charted nowhere in the US, didn't make a dent. A little over a decade later, their album Low Budget hits number 11. They went from being banned to selling out arenas. They were one of the only British invasion bands to have a massive second wave of success in America. But even during their big comeback, they couldn't escape their own weird luck. Their huge hit song Lola gets banned by the BBC. Now, you might think it's for the controversial subject matter, right? Nope. It was because the lyrics mentioned Coca-Cola, and the BBC considered that advertising. So Ray Davies had to fly all the way from New York to London and back in a single day just to re-record that one word as cherry cola. It's so perfectly Kinks. So what does all this chaos and creativity and comebackery add up to? Well, it's the legacy of the ultimate outsiders who somehow, against all odds, won on their own terms. They got into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Ray Davies was knighted by the Queen, and today they're seen as the perfect example of stubborn, brilliant individuality in rock music. And that brings us to today, because this story, it might not be over. Recently, both Ray and Dave Davies have said their famously terrible relationship has softened a bit, and they've even been talking about new material, which leaves us all with one final question. After decades of fighting, failing, and triumphing, could rock's most brilliant outsiders finally be coming back in from the cold?